Now, we've talked about GDP as a good measure of how much is being produced in an economy, but we haven't really talked about whether GDP is a measure of welfare. Now, again, it measures how much is being produced, and generally when we see increases in GDP, we're talking about increases in standards of living, and people are thought to be better off. But there are many shortcomings of GDP as a measure of welfare. First of all, you can't count and measure housework and childcare. While these are very important services that are being produced, if they're produced in the home and not traded in a market, we're unable to account for it in GDP, so it's not part of measured GDP. Also, leisure. Leisure is not counted and produced as a good or service, but we might argue that a country that has more leisure is better off. So if GDP is rising but leisure is going down, when we're measuring welfare or well-being of citizens of a country, we might say they might be worse off. So it's not clear whether an increase in GDP is going to increase well-being. Also, the underground economy. Lots of goods and services are produced in the underground economy, but since they're illegal, either because they're illegal practices or they're happening to avoid paying taxes, they're not measured, and hence not part of measured GDP. Additionally, we want to look at pollution when we're talking about social welfare or well-being. If we increase GDP and increase production, but significantly increase pollution at the same time, we might argue that we're worse off. How much are we talking about here? Well, the world underground economy in 2002-2003, estimates of how large this portion that's not being measured ranges from, in Europe, the United States, and Japan, 17% of reported GDP is the estimated size of the underground economy, all the way up to 41% in Africa and Central and South America. So while we think GDP is a very good measure of production, it's not a perfect measure of production because it doesn't account for the household production and childcare and the underground economy. It also isn't a perfect measure of social well-being or welfare because it doesn't account for leisure and pollution.